He felt like he was touching on something authentic. He really loved the whole process of doing the Poe films. I think my dad loved to do movies where using British actors and actresses, one of them being my future stepmother.
On October 25th, 1993, Vincent Price exhaled his last quiet breath in a Los Angeles home far removed from the bright lights and adoring crowds that had defined much of his life. The curtains were drawn, casting the room in muted shadows, and outside, the city moved with indifferent rhythm, unaware that one of the most distinctive voices of fear, elegance, and theatricality had slipped silently into history. Inside, however, the presence of a man who had spent decades mastering the art of terror, sophistication, and psychological nuance lingered like a fading echo of candlelight against the dark. It was a death strangely appropriate for a performer who had always walked the line between refinement and the macabre, a man whose life had been as much about shadow as illumination. Vincent Leonard Price Jr. was born on May 27, 1911, in St. Louis, Missouri, into a family whose wealth offered comfort but not emotional intimacy. His father, Vincent Leonard Price Sr., was a successful businessman with exacting standards, while his mother, Frances Wingate, maintained a household of order, propriety, and refined appearances. The young Vincent found little warmth in their structured home. Love was measured, and affection often filtered through the lens of expectation. From an early age, he gravitated towards solitude, finding companions in books, in art, and in the quiet, observing the world rather than fully participating in it. His keen eyes seemed to absorb more than playmates could understand, registering subtleties and undercurrents, a precocious awareness that would become a cornerstone of his art. His childhood was steeped in contrasts, the external beauty of wealth and cultured surroundings, juxtaposed with internal feelings of isolation and longing. Even as a boy, Price displayed a fascination with the strange and the hidden, the stories behind faces, the secrets lurking in shadowed corners. According to sources close to family acquaintances, he often wandered through his home with a thoughtful intensity, lingering over paintings, sculptures, and books, cultivating a sensibility that was at once artistic, introspective, and slightly otherworldly. These formative years shaped not only his aesthetic sensibilities, but also his understanding of human behavior, instilling in him a psychological sophistication that would later make his performances both chilling and mesmerizing. As adolescence approached, Price's intellectual and artistic hunger only deepened. He attended St. Louis University High School, excelling in literature, history, and the performing arts. Yet he remained socially distinct, a quiet observer in a world of peers who could not fathom the depth of his inner life. The tension between his intellectual curiosity and the desire for recognition created a subtle restlessness that followed him into higher education. He matriculated at Yale University, immersing himself in English literature, art history, and theater, where his voice, already rich and expressive, began to assume its signature power. Professors noted his rare combination of eloquence, presence, and psychological insight, recognizing in him the potential for a career that demanded more than mere surface charm. It was at Yale that Price discovered the theater as both sanctuary and proving ground. He threw himself into every production, refining gestures, timing, diction, and the modulation of presence. He studied human behavior with relentless attention, observing nuances in expression and body language, understanding how fear, desire, and tension could be communicated with subtlety. According to anecdotes from peers, Price approached performance with a meticulous discipline, rehearsing lines until delivery became instinctual, allowing him to inhabit characters fully while retaining an aura of mystery that captivated audiences. Even in these early years, the duality that would define his career, sophistication married to darkness, was already evident. Beyond the academic and theatrical corridors of Yale, Price's youth was marked by exposure to broader cultural influences. He traveled to London to study at the Courtauld Institute, deepening his appreciation for European art and history, and further shaping a refined sensibility that would later infuse his performances with a distinctive gravitas. Despite the richness of his education, he remained slightly apart, a solitary figure both engaged and detached, internalizing lessons, observing patterns, and developing the ability to inhabit multiple worlds simultaneously. The cultured gentleman, the observer, and eventually, the master of the macabre. His adolescence and early adulthood were not without challenge. While his talents were apparent, breaking into professional theater and film demanded persistence, rejection, and a willingness to navigate a world often indifferent to subtlety and nuance. Financial independence, though eased by family means, required him to prove his worth in auditions, minor roles, and the unpredictable early years of performance. Relationships, mentorships, and betrayals along the way honed both his resilience and his capacity for psychological insight, preparing him for a career where every performance demanded a combination of intellect, timing, and emotional authenticity. By the end of his formative years, Vincent Price had transformed isolation into observation, curiosity into skill, and refinement into artistry. The boy who had walked the halls of St. Louis homes and Yale classrooms alone had begun to craft the presence that would one day define a genre, combining elegance, intellect, and an uncanny understanding of fear. These early foundations, built in the shadows of family expectation, societal norms, and the unspoken pressures of genius, set the stage for a life that would straddle both the heights of fame and the intimate darkness of human complexity. On May 18, 1938, Vincent Price stepped onto the stage of Service de Luxe, and for the first time, the world glimpsed the magnetic presence that would define a career. The lights reflected off polished floors, and the hushed audience seemed to lean forward, sensing the rare combination of elegance, intelligence, and a subtle, almost imperceptible menace in the young actor. This was more than performance. It was a revelation, a declaration that Vincent Price was no ordinary talent. Behind the applause, however, lay years of quiet struggle, small roles, rejection, and the constant tension between ambition and insecurity. Hollywood would soon notice. Price's early forays into film were tentative, often uncredited, but each small role honed the precision, timing, and psychological depth that would later distinguish him. The late 1930s were a world of stark contrasts. Studios eager for charm, but often dismissive of the cerebral. Audiences craving spectacle, yet unaware of the subtle mastery of craft. Price navigated this environment with a careful balance, leveraging his formal training and refined persona, while quietly observing the workings of the industry. Sources close to colleagues recalled his meticulous preparation, the way he would study sets, lighting, and fellow actors with the eye of a painter analyzing a canvas, seeking every nuance that could elevate a scene from ordinary to unforgettable. In these formative years, Price faced not only professional obstacles, but personal ones as well. Relationships were brief, mentorships intermittent, and the constant demand for perfection imposed a psychological strain that few outside the theater world could comprehend. The young actor learned early that mastery came at a price. Social isolation, relentless self-critique, and the need to perform with unwavering composure even when internally wrestling with doubt. His early mentors recognized his rare gift, but also warned that his intensity, while brilliant, could become consuming if untempered. Price internalized this, channeling both pressure and passion into the roles that would slowly elevate him beyond the shadows of anonymity. By the early 1940s, Vincent Price began to cultivate a screen presence uniquely his own. In films such as Laura, 1944, and The Song of Bernadette, 1943, he demonstrated a remarkable capacity to imbue characters with sophistication, wit, and subtle tension, hinting at the darker elegance that would later define his horror work. Critics noticed, audiences responded, yet the young actor remained vigilant, aware that Hollywood's adoration could be fleeting. He understood the fragility of fame and the capricious nature of studios, a knowledge that would inform his choices and his ability to sustain a long, adaptive career. It was in the 1950s, however, that the transformation into the iconic figure we now recognize began. With the release of House of Wax on April 25, 1953, Price's career reached a turning point. The film showcased his uncanny ability to blend cultivated charm with underlying menace, a quality that allowed him to dominate scenes without shouting, to terrify without resorting to spectacle alone. This performance elevated him from respected actor to genre-defining icon, capturing the public imagination and marking the beginning of a career synonymous with psychological horror. Audiences, critics, and fellow actors alike were captivated by the way he could convey complexity through a glance, a gesture, a modulation of voice, each moment steeped in meticulous intent. The aftermath of House of Wax brought sudden attention, higher expectations, and new pressures. Price, once a student of subtlety, now became a master of persona, navigating both the creative demands of roles and the public's growing fascination with his enigmatic aura. Hollywood offered opportunities, but also scrutiny. Private life and public persona were increasingly intertwined, leaving little room for solitude. According to sources close to Price, he relished the artistry of his roles, but remained wary of the trappings of celebrity, understanding that the more he gave to the public, the more he risked losing himself in the expectations of an adoring but demanding audience. This period also introduced Price to collaborators who would shape his cinematic identity, including directors, writers, and fellow actors who recognized his precision and dedication. Together, they created a series of films in which elegance and horror merged seamlessly, allowing Price to explore themes of obsession, madness, and moral ambiguity. On February 17, 1959, House on Haunted Hill further solidified his status, demonstrating that he could carry a film as both protagonist and psychological anchor, guiding audiences through tension, dread, and dark fascination with seemingly effortless control. The duality of Price's work, a cultured gentleman invoking terror, became his trademark, and Hollywood audiences were captivated. Even as his fame rose, Vincent Price maintained a disciplined private life. The demands of film, travel, and publicity required him to balance work with periods of study, reflection, and artistic cultivation. He remained deeply invested in painting, collecting art, and exploring culinary arts, all of which informed his performances with subtle depth and sophistication. Some believe these interests were not merely hobbies, but essential coping mechanisms, ways to maintain identity and balance amid the pressures of sudden prominence. Price's ability to inhabit multiple worlds, the horror icon, the art scholar, the social observer, became central to his enduring allure and creative resilience. By the close of Part 2, Vincent Price had moved from a young, solitary observer to a recognized and admired actor, poised at the threshold of enduring cinematic legacy. His early struggles, mentorships, and formative roles laid the groundwork for a career defined by both artistry and psychological insight. The breakthrough of 1938, the precise cultivation of screen presence, and the landmark films of the 1950s positioned him as a figure whose elegance and menace would captivate generations. The stage and screen had become his domain, yet beneath the polished exterior remained a man aware of the precarious balance between public adoration and private complexity. A tension that would deepen as his life and career continued to unfold. By the early 1950s, Vincent Price had become more than a rising talent. He was shaping the very definition of cinematic horror. His performances in films like House of Wax on April 25, 1953, and House on Haunted Hill on February 17, 1959, had transformed him into a figure whose elegance and menace were inseparable. A man whose very presence could unsettle audiences while captivating them. He walked through the corridors of Hollywood with an aura of cultivated refinement. Yet the power he wielded on screen was born from years of psychological observation, meticulous preparation, and a deep understanding of human fear. Each role was a study in control, a voice, a glance, a measured pause, capable of both charming and terrifying, inviting audiences to lean closer even as they recoiled. This delicate mastery was what set Price apart from his contemporaries and cemented his position as a legend. The peak of his fame brought with it both opportunity and complexity. On screen, he became synonymous with gothic elegance, often portraying villains whose intelligence and sophistication made them as captivating as they were horrifying. Off-screen, his life was equally layered. Price married twice, first to Edith Barrett in 1938, a union that ended quietly in 1948, and later to Mary Grant in 1961, who remained by his side for decades. The pressures of maintaining public adoration while cultivating private stability were immense. Some believe that the refinement he displayed in his roles mirrored a deep need for order in his personal life, a way to assert control in a world that often felt chaotic and performative. During this period, Price's craft extended beyond mere performance. He collaborated with directors and screenwriters to create characters with psychological depth, exploring obsession, morality, and the fragile veneer of civilization. His Poe adaptations throughout the 1960s were particularly illustrative, each performance a meticulous balance of theatricality and subtlety, demonstrating his ability to translate literary complexity into cinematic presence. Audiences marveled at the transformation, seeing elegance entwined with dread, while critics increasingly acknowledged that Price's work elevated horror from sensationalism to art. Yet behind the acclaim, the man remained vigilant, aware of the fickleness of fame and the isolation that often accompanied it. Despite outward success, Price's personal life was not without shadows. Rumors persisted that he struggled with loneliness, the tension between public persona and private identity, and occasional bouts of melancholy. According to sources close to colleagues, he sometimes felt trapped by the very elegance that brought him renown, yearning to explore dimensions of his intellect and artistry that Hollywood typecasting rarely allowed. He immersed himself in painting, collecting art, and culinary pursuits, creating spaces where his creativity could flourish without constraint. These endeavors, while less visible than his film work, were integral to sustaining his sense of self, offering sanctuary amid the relentless demands of celebrity. The era also revealed the duality that had defined Price since childhood: the ability to inhabit multiple identities simultaneously. To audiences, he was the charismatic master of horror. To colleagues, he was a precise, thoughtful craftsman. To himself, he was a perpetual student of humanity, observing, analyzing, and refining both his art and his understanding of the human condition. This capacity to live within and between worlds allowed him to navigate Hollywood's volatile landscape, maintaining relevance and artistic integrity even as trends shifted. It was this combination of discipline, psychological insight, and cultivated presence that ensured his performances would remain timeless. By the late 1960s, Price's fame extended beyond the screen. He became a cultural figure, known not only for his distinctive voice and presence, but also for his sophisticated tastes, eloquence, and wit. Interviews, public appearances, and even collaborations in music, such as his narration on Michael Jackson's Thriller in 1982, reinforced a persona that was at once approachable and mysterious, blending cultivated charm with the aura of someone who had mastered the interplay of fear and fascination. Audiences of all generations were drawn to him. Yet the man behind the legend continued to maintain a carefully measured distance, preserving the privacy that allowed him to sustain creativity and personal equilibrium. Part 3 closes with Vincent Price firmly established as the monarch of cinematic horror, his public and private lives entwined in a delicate dance of performance and introspection. The peak of his fame brought accolades, recognition, and cultural immortality, yet it also magnified the subtle tensions and shadows that had always accompanied his genius. The elegance, menace, and psychological insight that defined his craft were now inseparable from his identity, both as an actor and as a man navigating the complexities of celebrity, personal desire, and the inexorable passage of time. As he moved forward into the 1970s, the next chapters would reveal the hidden struggles, late career reinvention, and quiet battles that lay beneath the polished veneer of legend. By the 1970s, Vincent Price's cinematic presence had become legendary. Yet behind the familiar charm and measured eloquence lay layers of hidden struggle. The decade brought both opportunity and quiet tension. Hollywood was evolving, and Price found himself navigating an industry increasingly obsessed with youth and novelty, while he remained synonymous with a style of horror that was as much psychological as theatrical. According to sources close to his collaborators, he sometimes felt the subtle pressure of being typecast, the elegant villain whose sophistication could only carry him so far. Yet his devotion to craft remained unwavering, and he sought to explore new avenues, both on screen and in life, that would allow his intellect and artistry to flourish. During these years, Price cultivated aspects of himself beyond acting. His lifelong love of art matured into serious collecting, and he became an authority on painting, amassing works that reflected his refined tastes and keen eye for both beauty and history. He also explored the culinary arts with passion, authoring cookbooks and hosting dinner parties that were as theatrical as his performances. Some believe that these pursuits were not merely hobbies, but essential forms of self-preservation, ways to maintain identity and control amid the shifting tides of fame and expectation. The public may have known him as a master of horror, but behind closed doors, Price was a polymath, a man whose curiosity and intellect sought expression in multiple dimensions. Despite this cultivated refinement, the shadows of the past persisted. Personal relationships, though lasting in some respects, were often tested by the demands of fame and the psychological intensity Price brought to every role. Rumors circulated of occasional bouts of melancholy and periods of introspection that could border on isolation. Some colleagues noted that his perfectionism, while a cornerstone of his craft, also created internal tension. The pressure to perform flawlessly on screen, mirrored by an equally exacting self-expectation off camera. Yet these struggles were balanced by an enduring grace, a wit that charmed those close to him, and a resilience that allowed him to navigate Hollywood's volatile landscape with dignity. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, Price embraced new projects that introduced him to younger audiences and expanded his cultural influence. His participation in Michael Jackson's Thriller on November 30th, 1982, lent his iconic voice to a work that would transcend genre and generation, cementing his relevance while showcasing the adaptability that had defined his career. Public adulation was matched by private reflection, as Price considered both the legacy of his performances and the personal sacrifices required to sustain them. According to interviews and biographers, he remained acutely aware of the duality of fame, the thrill of public admiration and the quiet cost of living under the gaze of constant expectation. Yet even as he reinvented himself creatively, Price's health began to signal the passage of time. The physical demands of acting, combined with early signs of emphysema and the onset of Parkinson's disease, introduced limitations that required adjustment and introspection. He approached these challenges with the same meticulous preparation and quiet dignity he had applied to decades of performance, finding ways to continue working while respecting the boundaries imposed by his body. His final decades were thus a study in adaptation, balancing enduring artistry with the reality of human vulnerability, demonstrating a resilience that extended beyond talent into the realm of personal fortitude. The 1970s and 1980s also highlighted Price's enduring fascination with psychological aspects of horror and performance. He continued to collaborate on projects that demanded intellect, subtlety, and a command of atmosphere, often mentoring younger actors and influencing directors who admired his approach. Behind the scenes, he remained a figure of mystery and refinement, careful to reveal only what served the narrative of his public persona, while preserving the private complexity that had defined his life from youth. This tension between visibility and secrecy, performance and introspection, would remain central to his identity, until the final years of his life. By the end of Part 4, Vincent Price had emerged not only as a cultural icon, but also as a man whose personal and professional life was marked by both reinvention and reflection. He had navigated Hollywood's changing landscape, maintained creative relevance, and cultivated private passions that allowed him to balance the intensity of public adoration with the solitude necessary for personal fulfillment. The stage was set for the concluding chapter, a period defined by the challenges of aging, final reflections on legacy, and the quiet culmination of a life that had forever altered the landscape of cinematic horror. On October 25, 1993, Vincent Price passed away quietly in his Los Angeles home, leaving behind a legacy that was as elegant and haunting as the characters he had so meticulously brought to life. The city outside continued its relentless motion, unaware that a voice that had enthralled generations had finally fallen silent. Yet within the world of cinema, art, and the countless hearts he had touched, his presence remained indelible, a shadow cast long, sophisticated, and unforgettable. His final years had been a mixture of reflection, adaptation, and quiet struggle, as the man who had commanded stages and screens now contended with the realities of aging, illness, and mortality. Parkinson's disease and emphysema had eroded the physicality that once allowed him to inhabit terror with such ease, yet his intellect, wit, and precise control over voice and gesture remained intact, a testament to a lifetime of discipline and artistry. During these later years, Price remained engaged with the arts that had always defined him beyond acting. His painting and collecting intensified, each canvas and sculpture reflecting the same meticulous attention to detail that characterized his performances. Culinary pursuits offered him both solace and a form of performance outside the lens of public scrutiny, a way to cultivate identity in an increasingly private world. Interviews, essays, and retrospectives became moments for reflection, where Price could speak not only about horror, but about the broader scope of creativity, observation, and human behavior that had informed his entire career. He often reflected on the duality that had defined his life: the public persona of the sophisticated icon of fear, and the private man of curiosity, intellect, and subtle melancholy. Even as fame faded with age, the cultural impact of Vincent Price only intensified. His performances continued to influence actors, directors, and audiences alike, redefining the potential of horror as an art form grounded in psychological complexity, elegance, and atmosphere. Generations who had not known the golden age of cinema discovered him through retrospectives. Films like House of Wax, April 25th, 1953, and House on Haunted Hill, February 17th, 1959, and later through projects such as the legendary narration on Michael Jackson's Thriller, November 30th, 1982, which introduced him to new audiences while reinforcing his enduring mastery of voice, timing, and presence. Some believe that his influence extends beyond genre, shaping the very way audiences understand suspense, fear, and the nuanced interplay between sophistication and menace. Price's personal life in these final years was marked by quiet reflection and enduring relationships, most notably with his second wife, Mary Grant, who remained his companion and caretaker. The careful cultivation of personal space and intellectual pursuits allowed him to maintain dignity and control over a life that had always been intensely observed. Yet even in seclusion, the man remained connected to the cultural dialogue he had helped shape, attending exhibitions, contributing writings, and engaging with the community of artists and scholars who shared his passions. The paradox of Vincent Price, both visible and private, commanding yet introspective, persisted until the end, leaving a complex and deeply human portrait of a man who had spent decades mastering both fear and elegance. When Vincent Price departed the world, he left more than films or collectibles. He left a template for artistry and horror and a blueprint for the interplay of intellect, emotion, and performance. Public memory often remembers the smooth, haunting voice, the poised gestures, and the unforgettable presence. Yet the true depth of Price's life lies in the tension between artistry and personal complexity, ambition and introspection, elegance and darkness. His legacy endures in every shadowed corridor on screen, every whispered scream, and every inspired artist who seeks to balance mastery with humanity. The world lost not only a performer, but a thinker, a craftsman, and a man whose curiosity and precision shaped both horror and culture itself. In the final reflection, the life of Vincent Price is a meditation on the interplay of talent and discipline, light and shadow, public acclaim and private depth. From the halls of St. Louis homes and Yale classrooms, through the stages and screens of Hollywood, to his quiet final moments in Los Angeles, he traversed a path defined by artistry, intelligence, and psychological insight. His story reminds us that the greatest performers are not merely entertainers, but observers of human nature, translating fear, beauty, and complexity into forms that resonate across time. Vincent Price, even in death, remains a figure who captivates, fascinates, and challenges us to look beyond the surface, to appreciate the elegance in darkness, and to recognize that true mastery is inseparable from the depths of human experience. His life, his performances, and his legacy endure as a cinematic and cultural echo, a whisper in the shadows, a reminder that some presences, like his, never truly fade.